know her best as playing Ella in Rodgers and Hammerstein's National Tour of Cinderella and from the first national tour of Bandstand as a featured ensemble member slash understudy of Julia Trojan. I am so happy to welcome Kaitlyn Mayse as my guest on My World with Stories podcast.
You know who tells me stop? You know who tells me you don't have what it takes and you will never reach the top? You know who tells me stop?
Can you explain how you got started in theater and like what made you want to do it?
Sure. Oh gosh. Let's see. I started doing theater, I guess. Well, I guess I took dance class first. You know, my parents put me in dance class to get some energy out when I was 4 or 5, I think. And then actually my aunt, she works at a high school and they were doing a production of The Wizard of Oz and they needed one more munchkin to fill out the munchkins. And technically I was too young to do it. I think I was 6 or 7 and they wanted you to be, I think the cutoff was 8, but she was like, no, like she's fine. She can do it. And so I went in and I learned the stuff and I did that show. And I think after that, it was pretty much like, I just loved it so much, even at that young age, that I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. And I just started doing it more and more and taking more classes. And, you know, I was like, more dance classes, voice lessons. I want to take acting classes. And it just sort of kept being this hobby that by the time I reached high school, I was like fine tuning it. And it became like a non-question that I was going to do it. I couldn't see myself doing anything else. I tried a couple different things to see if I would like it. I shadowed some nurses because I thought I wanted to be a nurse maybe instead, because I knew that it would be kind of a hard career path. But I just kept coming back to it and was like, I have to try. I love it so much. I have to try. And yeah, I just kind of never looked back.
How did Cinderella, the national tour, come about?
Funnily. So it's kind of a long story, but I will make it as short as possible. So when I first moved to the city in 2017, I think, I moved in the winter of 2017, January. That's when audition season in New York starts. Audition season is just like when the most auditions are happening for the year. So it's like about January through April, May-ish. So I moved with the intention of hitting the ground running and starting, you know, auditions. And I was auditioning for 2, 3, 4 things a day sometimes, many a week, just sort of because I was new here, I was just kind of throwing paint at the wall and seeing what sticks, you know. I wasn't sure yet if I belonged in New York or if, you know, if I was quote unquote good enough to be here. I wasn't sure. So I was just trying to see what would happen. But I remember that the audition for the National Tour of Cinderella got posted and I was like, I know I'm really right for this. I know that this is right in my wheelhouse of things. So I made a point specifically to get to that audition. There were others that day that I was like, oh, I could go to that one. But I was like, I really need to go to this one. So I showed up really early to sign up on the list. And even though I showed up at like 6:30, there were already so many people ahead of me. And so I waited until the monitor got there. I signed up on the list. I was like, okay, I'm really far down the list. So I ran and did a couple more auditions that day and would come back and check the list and be like, okay, I'm still really far. Then towards the end of the day, they were like, all right, we're not going to get to everybody, but this up to this number we're going to get to. And I was like right in there, like very last group. And they were like, all right, we're trying to get as many people in as possible. So the audition cut was 32 bars for, you know, of your choice in the style of the show. They were like, unfortunately, it needs to be 8 bars now. make it as quick as possible. And 8 bars is very short. So, we're scrambling. I'm like, all right, I guess I'm going to do these 8 bars. Like, they're not going to remember me. It's going to be 8 bars. I went in, I did 8 bars, but I decided to change because a lot of people were doing the end of their song, and 8 bars of the end of a song is usually like two notes, and you hold the note for a really long time, right? Because it's the big end of the song. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show them something different. So I switched my cut and did the bridge of a song, just 8 bars of that bridge, and was like, I'm just going to act this and give them a lot of, choices and different things instead of, a couple pretty notes at the end of a song, because I need to find some way to stick out. So I did that. I left, and then I got an email and was like, hey, can you come back in for callbacks? And I was shocked. But great. So I did a bunch of different callbacks for this. They did not know where to put me for a really long time. I was singing for Gabrielle, one of the stepsisters. And they had me, they're like, wait, can you dance? Come in and do these dancing things. And then they'd be like, wait, actually come back in and read for the stepsister. And then they'd be like, no, wait, go do this partnering dance thing. And then they had me singing for Ella. And then they just I went back and forth a lot of different times. I ended up going in about 14 times for this particular production. And at the end, they were like, all right, this is the final callback. Like, if you cannot go on tour, you need to leave, because this is the final day. And we're very serious and we're picking people and whatever. I'm like, okay. So we did more dancing, we did more singing, we did more sides, whatever. And then I never heard anything. That was in February, I want to say February or March of 2017. And I just didn't hear anything. And I was like, well, guess I didn't get it. And then I went about my life and I started auditioning for other things. I did another show in there. And then I went out of town for a family reunion, and I got an email in August, end of August, and was like, can you come back in for Cinderella? And I was like, whoa. That had left my brain. That one was gone. And I was like, oh crap. Okay. So I flew back early. I did a couple more rounds of dancing and sides and whatever. And a couple days after that, I got the call that I booked it. And so that was really wild. But so that was the first year of the tour I was on an ensemble track, the Vanilla Cake ensemble track. And then I understudied Gabrielle, one of the stepsisters, and Ella. So I did that for that year. And then I ended up going on as Ella quite a few times. Towards the end of that contract, I knew that they were looking for a new Ella, because the girl who was our Ella was not going to re-up her contract for the next year. And they were holding auditions in New York, but obviously I was on the road. And so I sent an email to a couple of the producers and casting director, etc., being like, hi, I don't know how this works. I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but I would love to be considered for the role. I know you're looking. I don't know how to make this happen though. Maybe I could send you a tape because, I was on the road. I couldn't leave their show to come to New York to do an audition for them. And I kind of didn't think anything of it. I was just like, you know what, I'm going to shoot my shot and then just see what happens. But I honestly was more valuable to them as this ensemble track, because I was an ensemble track. I already knew that track, and I knew Gabrielle and Ella as the understudy. So that's honestly more helpful to them than playing one track, the lead. So I was like, well, I'll just ask, but it's probably a no. And I was really lucky that we were about to come to New Jersey to perform, which is close by. And that's where the producer's home office is in New Jersey. So they were planning to come see it already. They were like, hey, we're going to do a planned put on for you, which is not, they don't do that very often. But they planned a day that I would go on and they would give the Ella a night off. And they all were like, okay, we're all going to come see the show with you on, which is like, on one hand, amazing. How many times do you get to do the entire show as that character, as the audition, never. Like, that's amazing. I had, 2-ish hours to show them everything I could do. Awesome. On the other hand, terrifying. I was like, I have 2 hours to mess this up, and everybody's here, like all the directors, all the producers, the original director from Broadway, everything, everybody was there. And I was like, ah, and so it was great, but really scary. And I really honestly don't remember much of that because I was so scared. I think I went on and I did my best, but I think behind my eyes was like nothing, because I was just like, do it, you got to do it right, you got to do it, and one of my friends in the ensemble kept like checking in on me, and she was like, Kaitlyn, take a breath, like you gotta take a breath. I even I spilled a bunch of stuff on stage, like this basket of vegetables that I was supposed to have in one scene, and I'm supposed to just carry it off. I spilled it all over the stage, and I was like trying to pick it up while they started this other scene. Like I was still on stage. It was truly, I left and I was like, well, that was kind of a mess. I tripped at one point. I think I one of the magic dresses, I almost didn't fire it correctly. It was just a whole thing. And I was like, you know what? It's fine. It's fine. I did it. I did my best. Let it go, And then about 2 months after that, when again, I had been like, all right, they obviously are not interested. It's okay. They called me and offered me the contract for the next year. And I was literally in a Walmart. We were traveling, and there wasn't really any place where we were to get food before the shows. So we were like, well, let's go to Walmart and just grab some groceries or something. And so I was in a Walmart in Alabama, and they called me and offered me the role. And I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I still don't believe, if I didn't have pictures, I would think it didn't happen. It was truly, truly awesome. So I think it's important for people to know that it's almost never a straight path to what you're doing, and the things that are meant for you will happen for you, and to trust the process. There are so many times that I had to be like, well, I did my best, and now I'm going to let that go and focus on something else. And it eventually came back to me.
What was your favorite part of playing Ella in Cinderella?
Many, many things. But I think one of the best things for me was that, one, it's a very uplifting show. It's very inspiring. It's very beautiful, and it has a great ending, and everyone's happy, So that is really nice to do every single night. Instead of, no hate to Les Mis, but something like Les Mis every night where you're just like, man, that's sad. Every single night, it's good. It's good to have something nice and happy that you leave the stage and you're like, wow, how nice. So that's great. But I think also doing a show that is geared towards families, especially young people and children, is really, really awesome. I saw so many young children at the show who just were enthralled by it, eyes wide, just so happy to be there, very into the story, and the magic of theater. And there are so many times that I saw myself in those kids. I don't know, exposing children to theater and to music and to all these beautiful cultural things, I think is so important for them. And I hope that maybe at least one of them saw the show and was inspired to do something creative themselves, and express themselves, even if it's not musical theater or dancing. I hope that it made them feel things and made them excited about life in a different way. And I mean, I would be blown away sometimes at how closely the kids were paying attention, because kids would come, they would bring kids to the show. Obviously it's Cinderella, but it isn't the Disney version, it's the Rodgers and Hammerstein version. It's longer than people think. It's not a kids show, it's not, Paw Patrol or something. So it's not built necessarily to keep children engaged for that long. It's like 2 hours, 15 minutes with intermission, I think. So that's a long time for kids to sit and be quiet. But even like towards the end of the show, there was a part, I don't know if you remember this, but there's a line that shows up a couple times that Cinderella says where something like, yes, and we are seeing each other for the first time right now. Because she presents herself in a couple different ways to him, Anyway, she says that very, very close to the end of the show again. And they've met several times at that point. And there was a kid in one time in the audience that was like, no, you've met her before like 3 times. And, obviously it's like silly when people, interrupt and break the fourth wall. But I was just like, wow, they're really paying attention. They counted how many times we had met before, and they're still paying attention, even though there's only 10 minutes left of the show. So yeah, it's a special kind of inspiring to do something like that and to see the way that young people interact and are inspired by live theater.
So I've had Beth Level on my podcast before, and I know that she did Bandstand, but you did the national tour.
Right.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Bandstand. Bandstand has a very, 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 very special place in my heart. Yes, the national tour went out, it was 2019 to 2020. I think the Broadway was 2017, I want to say. Bandstand did not get the time it deserved on Broadway. It closed earlier than it should have. However, I think it felt to me that the national tour brought it to audiences that it was meant for. We got to interact with so many families of veterans or families who had lost loved ones. And we worked with the TAPS organization in Washington, D.C. And I don't know, I feel the show speaks so profoundly to veterans' experiences and military service people's experiences, as well as I feel like more the Midwest and Middle America. I feel like it speaks more to those people than it does people in New York. I think people in New York really loved it, and Andy Blankenbuehler's choreography, and it was a stellar cast, great songs, but I think that it really touched people in a different way when we toured it in like Middle America and the South. And I think people had much more closer connections to it. And that was a totally different experience than, watching kids be excited about Cinderella. This was like a deep, moving moment for a lot of families, or people who didn't even realize some people didn't realize what they were coming to see. They thought it was like American Bandstand, like a review of like 1940s, 1950s songs, which it's not. And a lot of people be like, I brought my grandpa or I brought my dad, and he's never talked about this experience that he had, and he was crying, and later we got to talk about it, and he opened up about certain things, and it was like, whoa, just like how powerful a piece of art can be. That was incredible. And unfortunately, we did not get to finish the run of that show. We closed due to COVID the beginning of March. We were meant to do many more into July. So that was sad, but it was a completely different thing. And it was somehow, there are a lot of shows that artists do that are like, the dancers and the actors and the singers, they just love it because it's very like artistically fulfilling for the performers on stage, but not always for the audience. Sometimes it's very much like for the performers. I think a show that sometimes is like that is Sunday in the Park with George, things like that, that are like, they speak very much to the artist and they're just like, I just love this so much. But the audience may not necessarily connect because they don't understand what it's like to be an artist. Like that's just an example. But something about Bandstand, it is both. Like I've never done something so fulfilling as an artist that I love doing every single night, that I felt like I'm this movement that I'm doing and the lines that I'm saying and the songs that I'm singing, the harmonies I'm making, the teamwork with my ensemble was so artistic and beautiful in itself, but also spoke so profoundly to an audience. That's a really, really difficult thing to create on both sides. I think a lot of it has to do with Blankenbuehler's choreography. And, you know, the book is great, but yeah, so there's something very, 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 very special about Bandstand. And I think I'm excited to see if it will go, if the rights will open up to regional houses. Because I think that it will be something, it'll be something that, again, it speaks to so many people that it would be great to see it done, you know, and see it redone in lots of different ways for different audiences.
How did that audition like come about?
Bandstand.
Yeah.
I was on a layoff, which is like a break from Cinderella. We had like a week off, and found out that they were auditioning for this new tour, and my schedule lined up with that one. So I think I may have sent something before I came, because I think they started auditions before my break, but then like another chunk of auditions with like callbacks and stuff were happening on my break. So I think I might have sent some sort of video and my headshot and resume to be like, I'd like to be considered. And then they were like, oh yeah, come in and we'll do like, did the callbacks and whatever. I think initially I came in and did a couple of the ensemble dance numbers. And then they gave me, I sang some sort of ensemble like harmony cut for them. And they were like, oh, do you know any of the Julia songs? So then I did those, and then they said like, okay, here, they handed me some more like songs and a couple of scenes of Julia's, and they were like, learn these. And we're come back on Friday and we're going to do those. So I ended up, I was reading I was in for Julia for a little bit. I was there for final callbacks for Julia, and then but then they also were like, actually come back for final callbacks for ensemble too. You know, so I was doing that same thing again, where I kind of, sometimes people don't really know where to put me. So I was reading with them and singing with like different Donnies and that, and then would go over and do a different thing and do some partner dancing and whatever. Yeah, and so we did a couple of those, and then there was like a final day for the dancing, which then Andy Blankenbuehler came in and was like doing a final like look through of everyone to like see who he wanted, which was terrifying. I like had never met him in person yet, and he just like walked in the room while we were practicing, and I was like, you know, and I think everyone like silently gave each other like the, oh wait, people can't see what I'm doing, the like eyes, like but kept doing what they were doing, because they were like, you see him, right? You see him, right? You're like, and yeah, so that happened. And again, it was one of those things where I was like, all right, like gotta go. I think the last day I like brought my suitcases with me because I was going back to tour, and I was like on a time crunch of like, okay, I have to get out of here at this time because I have to go to the airport. And yeah, I think I just like, okay, and that was that, and whatever. That one, I think they called me the next day to like talk to me about like the contract and stuff, and they were really great and they were very sweet, and they actually talked to me through like sort of their thought process of like, you know, when I was in for Julia, but also in for the ensemble, and they were talking me through like why they were choosing what they did and like why they wanted to put me in the ensemble and cover her instead of whatever, you know. And I was like, you don't have to explain it to me, but it was nice, because usually, you know, in this field, you don't get a lot of feedback after auditions. So it was nice to sort of hear their thought process about that. And yeah.
What's your understudy process like being on a tour? Like, what's that?
Mm. Yeah, it's a little difficult, I will say, but I enjoy doing it. I think at first it's very overwhelming, and I think anyone who understudies or swings will tell you this. It's totally normal to feel very overwhelmed at the beginning, because you're still learning your stuff, but then you feel like, oh shoot, like my understudy track is doing stuff and I should be paying attention to that too. So there's this fine balance of making sure you know your track first before you start trying to learn their track, because otherwise it's like, yeah. So I think I focus on trying to get my stuff as down as I possibly can, you know, meaning when I come off from rehearsal, when I'm on break, writing down notes about what we just did for my brain, so that later, you know, you think in the moment that you're going to remember it, but occasionally you'll forget. You're like, when am I supposed to enter, or what side is it, or, you know, who am I supposed to walk to, or what number am I supposed to be on, you know. So I make those notes, and honestly, once you make the note, a lot of times you don't have to look back at it, because it's just the making the note that helps you remember. But anyway, so I'll do that. And then when I start to feel a little more comfortable in rehearsals, although a lot of times if the rehearsal is really short, like Bandstand, we only had like 2 weeks to put it up before we moved to tech rehearsals. So that one, it was a little bit harder than other ones that I've done, because we just didn't have a lot of time. We were really shoving things quickly. But then once I'm starting to feel like, okay, I know my track well enough, I'll start to pay attention to the other track, or tracks, however, you know, you're understudying or swinging, or who you have to cover, and start making notes for them. Even if it feels overwhelming at first, because you're like, where do I even start? It's just like, okay, they happen to be doing the scene right now. Like, where did they exit? Write it down. And I think it's good to have an open conversation, the person that you're covering. And I did this with my understudies the second year of Cinderella as well, just being like, hey guys, like, this is really, really hard track. Like, the Ella track is ridiculous, and you're responsible for so many things, including tons of props and magic dresses and other people's shoes that you have to put on their feet on stage, you know, just crazy stuff. So like, I was like, this is hard. So, you know, whatever your process is, that's great. But I am here. Ask me questions, you know? And I did the same thing with when I was understudying Julia. I was just like, okay, I'm writing things down, but like, now I'm like, okay, I saw her go this way, but she was kind of covered by somebody, and now she has a jacket and her purse. How did she get that? And, you know, and sometimes it's theater magic. It's meant for the audience not to be able to see what happened. And so as the cover, you don't know what happened either. And so, you know, I'm like, hey, what's happening? And I actually learned that one of my ensemble, like coworkers, like goes off stage for a second, grabs her stuff, and like turns around and hands it to her as she's like walking, and suddenly she has that stuff, you know, just weird small things that you wouldn't think about. So yeah, so having that conversation open, making those notes, and then I would start, you know, well, obviously you got to learn the lines. So, you know, running the lines by yourself, looking at them. You know, some people like to write them down. With something like Ella or Julia, there's too many lines to just sit and write them all down. So I usually don't do that. But then once I feel a little bit more confident, starting to have someone read with me, a lot of times the other person, like the opposites cover, because I'm like, hey, you need to work on lines too. Do you want to run lines? You know, and working that in off time. So then you can actually see, do I actually know? And do I know what the cue line is? or, you know, because when you're doing it by yourself, sometimes you don't realize that because you're reading it, you don't actually know what the cue line is, or you don't actually know what their next line is because you've kind of been reading it yourself. So that's really helpful. And then I just start like walking it in my hotel rooms, usually. Being like, okay, let me do this scene. Do I know it? Can I walk through it? Do I know exactly what's happening, or do I need to think about it? Because when you actually go on, the less that you have to think about, the better, because you're already like in panic mode. So like if you're trying to search for a lyric, like that, you don't want to be in that spot. So you don't want to be having to think, what's the next line? You don't want to be having to think, you know, what note is the harmony for whatever, because you're already thinking, you know, you're already having to deal with costumes, which you never had to deal with before. And there's lights in your face. And there's so many other things that like, you've got to get to a point where you're like, I know this back and front, you know? Yeah. And you're never going to know all of it. Like, you're never going to, you can be as prepared as you think, but like, there's always going to be something that comes up where you're like I didn't know this thing was here, or like this person is now on the other side of me and I thought they were supposed to be on this side. And you just, you know, so again, it's like knowing the material well enough that when you get in that spot of like, this isn't what I expected, you can continue to roll with it. You know where the scene's going, you know where you're supposed to end up, even if you get tripped up on a line or something, you know what the goal of the scene is, so you can get yourself back on track or lead the person back into, the line that you need to say so that they can say their next line, because otherwise, you never want to be in a place where you're frozen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's like your dream roles to play?
What a great question. Let's see. Well, for a long, long time, and I guess it still is, my like main big dream role was Belle. Always love Belle in Beauty and the Beast. Just a great character, always been my fave. I was lucky that I got to play her in 2016 in a regional show. That was like, again, if there wasn't pictures, I wouldn't think that it happened, because it was just like dream come true. I would always put anything down to play her again. But let's see, other dream roles. Oh gosh, this is gonna sound so silly, but I like have this thing about the like some of like the villain guys that like I probably will not play because I am not that type. Obviously, I've played princesses and things, but like I would love to play like Judd Fry in Oklahoma, or like Judas in Jesus Christ Superstar, or like who else? Javert in Les Mis. Like, I don't know what it is. It's like this, like, it's so, maybe it's because it's just so opposite of what I do most of the time. It's just like this big, strong guy with like scary songs, it's just like, ooh, I want to do that sometime. So if anyone's looking for a female Judd, hit me up. But also just, I think I'm looking forward to being able to play like mother roles. I would love to play Donna in Mamma Mia, but like I'm not old enough yet, or Diana in Next to Normal, or Mother in Ragtime. I'm not quite there yet, but I am so looking forward. There's a meatiness and like a complexity to those women that sometimes you don't see as much in like the younger women roles. And I try to, when I play, especially, someone like Ella, because Belle has a little bit more of this, but like Ella especially, I tried to incorporate a little bit more of spunk, a little bit more oomph to them than just like a sweet girl, because they should have their own characters, they should have their own complexities, they shouldn't just be two-dimensional, and I want I want young girls and women to see complex women on stage, and instead of that 2D simple, like, here's the wicked stepmom and here's the sweet ingenue, but the mother roles, those older roles, they already have that written in, and I'm very excited to sink my teeth into those someday.
What's next for you, like moving forward as stuff is like reopening and stuff?
Um, that's a great question. I think right now, what's next is learning to be gentle with myself, and I think everyone needs a little bit of this, learning to be gentle with themselves as we ease back into this. It's difficult. Um, everyone everyone feels like they've taken a step back in some way, where you feel like, oh, my career has this certain momentum to it, and then everything stops for 19 months or however long it's been, and you can do what you can, take voice lessons, take dance classes, those types of things to keep yourself ready and keep the craft honed. But everyone, I'm sure most people feel like, man, I feel like I'm starting over, or like I feel like I've gone down 4 rungs on the ladder, just because that momentum is gone. Sorry. But yeah, so it's that learning to be gentle with yourself, and learning to be okay with where we are right now, and knowing that some people will be working because there are jobs opening up, but there are not many jobs opening up, and most of our industry is out of work, which means that those small amount of jobs everyone is trying to get. So being okay with the fact that there will be some people working because there is work, and there will be lots of people who are not working, and either one is okay. I think that is really tough. People are working really hard. We wanted so long, like, oh, I miss theater. I want it to be back. I want it to be back. I want it to be back. And now that it's back, it's really daunting and scary. And, it's hard not to measure your worth against whether or not you have a job. And, even if you're not in this industry, your worth is not based on your work. You are worthy as you are, without any of that attached. You are worthy as a person just existing. And that's hard to remember sometimes. So that, and I'm trying my best to submit for what I can, making self tapes and sending things in, because most things are digital right now. So relearning how to audition on tape and not in person in the room. Like it's a different skill. And also like having to learn more about technology, because I'm like, oh, I have to edit this video and I have to get the lighting right. And as you can see, I have this microphone now that I'm, still learning how to get the sound correct, and match it up correctly, and just crazy stuff that it's like, all right, we're pivoting, we're doing our best, and it's different. It's going to be different, and that's okay. Right.
Where could people follow you if they want to stay up to date?
Amazing. Yeah. So I've been off of Instagram for a little bit. I took a little mental health break, but I will be back on Instagram soon. So my Instagram is at Kaitlyn Mayse. And let's see, I think my Twitter is the same. Is my TikTok the same? I think it is. If you search my name, I think you would find me on TikTok. I think it might just be the letter K, Mayse. And then my website is just www.kaitlynmayse.com. So that's where all that main stuff is. There's a YouTube channel as well, but all of the like main videos from that channel are on my website. I think they're a little bit easier to find right now on my website than on YouTube. Yeah, the website's getting an overhaul right now. I'm trying to get back up to date. We're about to get new headshots. We're trying to rebrand everything post pandemic, right? So it's a weird process, but if you would like to follow me along on that journey, you definitely can.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, letting me talk about all these things that I love so much. It's really great. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening and watching to My World with Stories podcast. For more info, go to Instagram and Facebook at My World with Stories podcast, and make sure that you give us a like, a subscribe, a follow, whatever you want. Do it because we love you guys so much, and thanks for hanging with us. Bye.